Look in the mirror right now and you won't think twice about it. You'll see your face, check your teeth, fix your hair, and walk away. But for most of human history, that same reflection would have sent your ancestors running, not from vanity, from terror. So, what did they see in a mirror that you don't? To understand this, we have to go back before glass even existed. For tens of thousands of years, the only reflective surface a human being ever encountered was water, a still pond, a dark lake at dusk. And the moment your ancestors leaned over that water, something strange happened. A second face appeared, staring back from inside the earth itself. Anthropologists studying ancient belief systems across nearly every early culture found the same pattern repeating independently on different continents with no contact between them. Water held something, a spirit, a double, a soul. The Greeks told the story of Narcissus, who stared too long into a pool and wasted away, trapped by his own reflection until he died. The Greeks didn't write that as a story about beauty, they wrote it as a warning. Because here's what your ancestors believed, almost universally: your reflection wasn't just an image, it was a second you, a fragile copy of your soul, temporarily separated from your body and hovering just beneath the surface. This is why, across cultures that had never met each other, the same rule kept appearing: cover the mirrors after someone dies. In Jewish tradition, mirrors in the house are covered for 7 days after a death. In parts of rural Mexico and Eastern Europe and regions of China, the practice shows up again and again, passed down for centuries with no shared origin. The fear was specific. If a soul is leaving a body and a mirror is nearby, the soul might get confused. It might see its own reflection and become trapped inside the glass instead of moving on. Or worse, it might pull the next living soul that looks into it along for the journey. This wasn't superstition to the people who practiced it. This was protection. Venice in the 1500s perfected a technique for backing glass with a mercury tin amalgam, creating the clearest reflective surface humans had ever produced. The Venetian government guarded the formula so fiercely that craftsmen who tried to leave the city and sell the secret elsewhere were hunted down. Mirrors became status objects, expensive and rare. Even as they spread through wealthy European households, the old fear didn't disappear. It just got rules attached to it. Don't look into a mirror by candlelight, people warned, because that's when spirits cross over most easily. Don't let a child see their reflection before their first birthday, because their soul hadn't fully settled into their body yet, and a mirror could pull it loose. Break a mirror, and you don't just lose a piece of furniture, you damage the soul trapped inside it. The number 7 years of bad luck wasn't random. In old folk belief, the human body was thought to renew itself completely every 7 years. Break the mirror, break the soul image, and you'd have to wait a full cycle for yourself to be made whole again. This sounds like ancient superstition, the kind of thing your ancestors believed because they didn't have science. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. In 2010, psychologist Giovanni Caputo at the University of Urbino ran an experiment that, on paper, sounds almost too simple to matter. He had participants sit in a dimly lit room and stare at their own reflection in a mirror without looking away for 10 straight minutes. Nothing else happened. No tricks, no special lighting, no chemicals, just a person, a mirror, and stillness. Within minutes, the majority of participants reported something deeply unsettling. Their own face started to change. Some saw their features distort into something monstrous. Some saw the face of a dead relative staring back instead of their own. Some swore the reflection in the glass was no longer mimicking their movements, that it had started moving on its own, a fraction of a second behind. Caputo called it the strange face illusion, and he repeated the study multiple times with different groups, getting the same result over and over. If staring at your own face for 10 minutes can convince your brain that you're looking at a stranger, how solid is your sense of self in the first place? The leading explanation comes down to something called neural adaptation. Your visual system is built to detect change, not constancy. When you stare at anything fixed for too long without the normal eye movements, the neurons responsible for processing that image start to fatigue. Your brain, starved of fresh visual data, starts filling in the gaps with whatever it has stored: fragments of memory, fear, expectation. The face you've seen 10,000 times suddenly stops looking like data and starts looking like a hallucination your own mind is generating in real time. In other words, your ancestors who feared their reflection weren't entirely irrational. They had simply never had electric light, never had a brightly lit bathroom mirror you glance at for 3 seconds before brushing your teeth. They sat by firelight, where the flicker and the long, unbroken stillness of staring at water or polished metal created exactly the conditions modern neuroscience now knows can warp a human face into something monstrous. They didn't need a theory, they had the experience itself. Recognizing your own face is not something you were born knowing how to do. The classic test for self recognition, putting a mark on a child's face and watching whether they reach for it in the mirror, shows that human babies don't pass this test until around 18 months old. Before that age, a baby looking into a mirror treats the reflection like a stranger, another child in the room, reaching toward it, talking to it, sometimes getting upset when the other child won't play back the way they expect. What that means is unsettling if you sit with it. Your sense that the face in the mirror is unquestionably you, your certainty about that, had to be built. It wasn't automatic, it was learned, slowly through repetition. Stretch the conditions just slightly, dim the lights, remove the blinking and shifting, and constant micro movement of normal vision, and that hard won certainty starts to crack again. The stranger your ancestors feared was never gone. It was just buried under 18 months of learning and a lifetime of fluorescent lighting. There's one more piece of this that almost nobody talks about, and it has to do with why this fear shows up specifically at night and specifically when you're alone. Caputo ran a follow up version of his study where he had participants stare at someone else's face instead of their own, under the same dim, unbroken conditions. The same distortions appeared, but participants reported feeling far less afraid when the face belonged to someone else. The fear wasn't really about the face changing, it was about your own face changing while you had no one else in the room to confirm what you were seeing was wrong. This is the same isolation your ancestors were navigating every single night for most of human history. No streetlights, no second source of light to break the trance, often no one else awake in the house. A person alone, by a guttering candle, staring into polished metal or still water, was placing themselves in precisely the conditions modern neuroscience now knows produce this effect. Of course, they built rituals to protect themselves from their own mirrors. They were having the experience completely alone every night for their entire lives. Folklore researchers have pointed out that mirror based ghost stories are some of the most persistent and widespread in the world, showing up in Japanese kaiden tales, Latin American legends, European ghost stories. The details change, the core structure never does. Someone stares too long. Something in the glass looks back that shouldn't be there. It survived because every so often, under the right conditions, low light, long stillness, total isolation, a person's own brain manufactures the exact experience the story warned them about. The legend isn't being kept alive by tradition, it's being kept alive by biology, regenerating itself in a fresh mind every time the right conditions happen to line up. So the next time you catch your reflection in a dark window at night or in a bathroom mirror with the lights too low and something about your own face feels off for half a second, that's not nothing. That's not your imagination playing a meaningless trick. That's the same ancient machinery your ancestors lived with their entire lives, the machinery that made them cover mirrors after a death and refuse to look at their own reflection by candlelight. They built rituals around it. You just built a habit of looking away fast enough to never notice.